All right. Fantastic. Well, welcome, everybody. Or should I say welcome myself? I'm the one who's usually not here. My name is Dr. Marcus Ross, and I live here in Lynchburg. And I run Cornerstone Educational Supply, which is a local company here that produces science education equipment. So stuff for the science labs. And yes, a few of you have noticed I'm walking around without shoes here at the moment. For the rest of you, go ahead, take a look for a moment. That's fine. Yeah, I tend to go barefoot a lot or wear flip-flops because when I go barefoot places and other people look at me weird, I just decide that a half-inch worth of rubber on my feet just does everything great for everybody else's psyche. But nonetheless, as I'm walking around here, I just got to get a little more comfortable because after all, you guys got a chance to run around and hang out and do that sort of stuff. I think I just need to be casual in all of this. Did I go to Grace Church? Yes, I did. My family and I attended Grace Church for a long time, 16 years. And we now attend Calvary Chapel, which is out on Timber Lake, not far from here. For, let's see, what was it? For 16 years, I taught at Liberty University. I was their fossils and rocks guy. My background is in paleontology and in geology, so I studied dinosaurs, yes, and quite a few other things. And we're going to be spending a lot more time on the other things than we are going to be talking about dinosaurs. But if you have questions about dinosaurs, don't worry. I've been geeking out about them since I was 4 years old. So I got into paleontology because of dinosaurs. I continued on, worked all the way through a PhD, and then got to teach college. And then about coming up on 3 years ago, I guess now, 2 years ago, my wife and I talked, and we decided to step away from teaching full-time and work for the company that we started, Cornerstone, full-time, making science supplies for folks. And Timberlake Christian School has been good enough to purchase some stuff from us. And the little bags that you guys have in front of you are filled with actual real fossils and include some of the sorts of things like these geologic time sheets that we include in our regular rock, mineral, and fossil kits. We make nice little boxed kits for those, for people to study and learn about minerals and properties and stuff like that. We do biology specimens and chemistry supplies and physics things and yeah, all that sort of stuff. But I am here today to talk about paleontology and talk about geology in the context of your apologetics boot camp. So I kind of like this as I'm looking at the boot camp thing. It's dinosaurs in here. I could see the first thing that I noticed was this sailback critter over here, which isn't a dinosaur, but you'll find it in your bag o' dinosaurs that you end up getting at like, Party City or, whatever. That is a mammal-like reptile by the name of Dimetrodon. And we have other sorts of stuff in here. There's definitely dinosaurs. But noticing a lot of the dinosaurs are in the old school kangaroo position that you get in the bag o' dinosaurs. They're not like with the legs sticking, with the tail sticking out and whatnot. But I love it. I love the color scheme for this. I see a sauropod, long-necked dinosaurs, T-Rex stuff in there. Well done. Very well done. That deserves a round of applause. That was slick. Did any of you recognize there were dinosaurs in there? Yes and no. Yeah. All right. All right. So the first talk that we're going to go through here, I've titled Fabulous Fossils because I'm a guy who likes alliteration. I also do a talk called Mineral Mayhem and Rock Around the Clock, it's weird stuff. Anyway, what you're going to find out is that jokes from me are kind of like getting ramen noodles from Sam's Club. Okay, you're going to get a lot, right? There's a big old case of jokes. In the end, you're like, I don't know that was really all that good for me. Like, doesn't matter. You will be filled with lots of junk. All right, so that's kind of the way the jokes go around here. So, outline for the talk here is first off, well, what are fossils and how do they come into existence? How do they get formed? Why do we even have all these cool little things in this little bag that I brought for you guys? We're going to talk about fossils and biology, how those things are connected, and then we're going to talk about fossils and geology and come around to start thinking a little bit about how we think about fossils geologically from a biblical perspective as well. And we'll come back to that topic too in the second talk, which is going to be about rocks, right? About geology. So first up, what are fossils and how did they form? So the first definition here is that a fossil is the remains of a formerly living organism. Now, if I just stopped right there, then the deer dead on the side of the road would count as a fossil. So we can't stop the definition there, right? Just some dead animal doesn't quite count as fossil. So it's a formerly living organism, or the remains or the traces of them, preserved within a geological setting. So in some ways, okay, let's see. All right. In some way, this has got to be found in rocks, right? It's got to be found preserved in the geological record. And we've got lots of different types of fossils. I'm going to be using this screen here up a lot in order to get us thinking about the different types of fossils. And so things are going to be kind of popping in and popping out in the same spots that they're in here as we talk about the different, not we, why do teachers say that? What are we talking about today? What am I talking about today? Me. Now, if you guys are talking, it's called interruption. But anyway. So, an organism. When we use the term organism in science, we're talking about a living thing. Now, a lot of times when we think about organisms, we think about things that are moving around, right? Animals are organisms. But so are plants. Plants are organisms. So are bacteria, right? So are fungi. So animals, plants, fungi, bacteria, protists, all sorts of stuff count as organisms. If they are satisfying those little check boxes that we try to make for saying this thing is alive. And then, of course, we have things like viruses and whatnot that were like, yeah, sort of alive, but not quite, right? We don't know what to do, how to put them in there. So when it comes to fossils, there's a couple of different sorts of fossils, big categories of fossils. And I don't mean like dinosaur fossils and fish fossils. What I mean is what sort of evidence of the formerly living organism are we even looking at here? So one type of fossil that we have is what's called a body fossil. So a body fossil are actually all the ones that I brought along with me right here as examples. Some of these are casts and replicas. Others are the original fossils. So for example, I brought along here a fossil of an ammonite. Now an ammonite is an animal that was basically a squid with a coiled shell. And so out at the bottom of this thing would be this little squiddy sort of guy. And yeah, squiddy, that's a good word. It's probably in the dictionary. And they would have had a cool spiral shell. Now, we don't have any ammonites alive today, but there is one animal that's pretty close to that. It's called the chambered nautilus. And it's got a little squiddy thing sticking out of it and a coiled shell, but its anatomy is actually a little different from these guys and gals. They were both. So this would be a body fossil. It is representing the actual body part of the animal. This piece of petrified wood that I just got the other day from somebody who donated it to us. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I like this. This is a body fossil because it represents the physical hard parts of the tree that was preserved in the fossil record. So that's what geologists talk about when they're talking about fossils and whatnot. One big category is the body fossils. Those are the ones that we're most familiar with. So there are things like bones. There are things like teeth. There are things like petrified wood, actual shell material, and the exoskeletons of things like trilobites or other sorts of arthropods. So in your fossil kit or bag that you've got there, you've got some body fossils. You've got a shark tooth that's in there. You've got, what else is in there actually? I wasn't the one who packed these. I was looking at them the other day. Oh, and there's the little card, right? We've got a little clam, probably. Yep, we've got a clam. That's a body fossil. And the coral is the ray tooth and the petrified wood. But we have one thing, we'll talk about that, the gastropod, that is not a body fossil. Oh, yeah, great, thanks. Reference key. The teachers always need these, right? Otherwise, even the teachers forget stuff. Shh, sorry, teachers, I just spilled the beans. Okay. Now, there's other sorts of fossils as well. There's things called molds. And I don't mean like fuzzy stuff that grows on the things in the refrigerator that have been kept in there a little too long. One of my kids who's in junior high as well, he's working on a science fair project this week because it's due next week, right? You know, that sort of thing. We all know the science fair and what happens with that, right? He, Tuesday, all right. Anybody?
8th grade.
It's like heart palpitations. You got science fair coming up? Yep. All right, awesome. So one of my boys, who's in 7th grade right now, he's doing a science fair experiment seeing if different levels of saltiness in the water will slow down mold growth in rice. So he cooked rice with regular tap water, 1% saline, 2% saline, 3% saline. He's looking to see, does the salt that gets pulled into the rice stop the mold from growing anything? Like, Way to go. That was awesome. That was a last minute one because the other one that we were trying to do failed. We were trying to grow slime molds. Finicky little things, but cool when they work. This type of mold is different. Not fuzzy stuff that gives you allergies. This is a mold like I am making a copy of something. And so if I want to make a copy of an impression or something like that as a type of mold, I'm going to press the item into something soft, and then as I release it, what's left there is the mold. Okay? So the cast then is what happens when the mold is filled in and a replica is made. So I got a couple examples here of this. Up at the top, oh, actually that fern shouldn't be there. It's sort of an impression. This little gastropod shell, which is similar to some of the ones that are in your little bags, is actually not the shell. It's the space inside the shell that got filled up with mud, and then the shell disintegrated. The shell dissolved away, but it left behind the internal spiral of the snail shell. So that is a cast. That is a replica of it. Down at the bottom here is one that a friend of mine and I were tipped off to some dinosaur footprints in Washington State, which immediately caught my attention. Somebody said, I've got dinosaur footprints and I live in Washington State, and my first response was, no you don't. Because I know a little bit about the geology of Washington, and I know that there is only one dinosaur fossil known from the entire state because there's no rocks with dinosaur fossils in them that are sticking up in Washington. And he said, I've got dinosaur footprints. I'm like, okay, sure. Send me a photograph. I don't want to get all excited. Send me a photograph. He sent me a photograph, and I looked at it. I went, those are dinosaur footprints. Where are you? Washington. Wait a second. There's no dinosaurs in Washington. He's like, whatever. Come take a look. So we went. I grabbed a buddy of mine who teaches college in California. We both went up to Washington State. We looked at his fossils. Sure enough, they were absolutely legit. He took us to the spot on the road where he found them sticking out of the rocks by the side of the road on a fairly busy enough kind of road. And nobody had noticed that there's this little block of dinosaur-bearing rock that has been pushed up somewhere on the edges of the Cascade Mountains. And we were feeling underneath and looking, and we saw there were more footprints in the rock. And we're like, this is amazing. So we wrote up a scientific abstract, a short paragraph describing those finds, and we made a big poster. So you guys who are doing science fair, this is what we do in science as well. We make big posters. They just have more words that nobody can pronounce. So we put that up there, and we brought along that replica. My friend took pictures of the original, and he was able to 3D print a copy of that footprint. And this is a footprint. I'll point it out on both sides here since you guys won't see this. But there are the toes, and there's the back of the foot, and these little lumpy bits are actually the impressions of the scales on the foot of the dinosaur. So there's a toe, there's a toe, there's a toe, there's a toe, there's possibly one, and there's the heel. And that is of an ankylosaur. That's one of the armored dinosaurs that have like the clubs on their tails. And it's a little footprint. It's only like this big, so it's like a little guy. And we don't know if it's a baby or just like a little dinosaur, generally speaking. All the other footprints were likewise not very large, so it could be this was like this little island community of dinosaurs that got smashed up, their rocks got smashed onto North America later on. We went to the Geological Society of America. We showed them these casts, this impression of the footprints, and people would come up to our poster, read, dinosaurs in Washington. They're like, there's no dinosaurs in Washington. We'd say, we know, look, we have some. And it's like, what? Sure enough. There's all sorts of stuff to discover out there. There really still is lots to discover. One of the things that can be tough sometimes about science is that it seems like everybody already knows everything. And all your job is to do is memorize what's known. And that's important. You have to be able to learn the things that are known so that you can then move on to discover things that aren't, whether that's in science or it's in history or other sorts of things. So, how do fossils get made? How do you get a footprint to become a fossil? Because I've made a lot of footprints out in the sand at the beach. None of them are still there. They don't happen very easily. They don't get preserved very well. I think Noah's flood is a key component to this because Noah's flood is the sort of thing that's going to be able to produce a whole lot of mud and sediment and bury things quick enough that you don't have to worry about the wind blowing away your footprints. all of a sudden there's enough stuff coming over and covering that those footprints can be preserved. Well, to make a fossil, you first need, right, an organism. So here's a picture of a type of fish called a gar. And gar are nasty little fish. Actually, they're not little. Some of them can be really big. They have a long, thin, pointy snout with lots and lots of teeth. They're aggressive fish, and they'll snap and bite you. So first you need an organism. You need a gar, for example. But then you need the organism to die. I want fossils, therefore I want my organisms nice and dead. All right. The nice thing about paleontology is that we study dead things that don't smell bad. Yeah, rocks just smell like rock. There's nothing there. You walk into a paleontology lab and it smells dusty, it doesn't smell like formaldehyde, right? Doesn't smell, or heaven forbid that anybody's been working on the anaerobic bacteria for a little while. Ooh, that's not good. All right, so then you need that dead thing not to just stay dead on the bottom of the ocean, because then things are going to eat it. You need it to be buried. You need it to be covered up with a bunch of mud and sand and clay and things like that, what we call sediment. And if the minerals in the sediment are sufficient, they start to replace, they start to change the actual material that makes up the bones and convert them into fossil material. So this is a picture up over here of a gar fossil fish from Wyoming. So I got a gar picture and found a gar fossil, and it kind of looks like its face is very different. If I go back here, right, our gar had a really pointy face, and then it died. This is not a gar that has a wide face. It had a pointy face, but the pressure of the rock as it squashed broke the bones and flattened out the skull. It wasn't feeling it by that time. It was dead, very dead. Not even mostly dead. We're talking all dead. Right? That's a joke for the older people in the room. Anyway, so excellent. You've been trained well. If the bones or the teeth or the shells dissolve and get replaced, then you end up with things like casts. So here's a picture of some clams. And this is a type of rock that we put in some of our kits. It's a limestone. And all these little holes and all these little scoops are where there used to be clam shells. But those shells dissolved away. And so we now have casts and molds and body fossils. Occasionally, you also get some stuff that's wild and totally out of expectations. In 2005, which I know is an eternity ago for you guys, because you weren't even alive then, right? Yep, I was, and I had darker hair, and more of it, let's face it. 2005, this was published. Here's a picture of what was inside a fossil. Oh, yeah, that's the right, yeah, ew. And, right, but cool. Because this shouldn't be there. If the Earth is many millions, actually several billion years old, and if this fossil is what the authors think that it was, the authors think that this T-Rex fossil is 68 million years old. They were shocked when they discovered that inside what was a fossilized bone on the outside, on the inside was not fossilized. And instead, they found these structures. These are blood vessels. These are veins and arteries. And that little red circle in there just might actually be a red blood cell that has probably converted. It's no longer a complete cell at that point. But that's exactly what they expect. They showed video of them using tweezers to stretch out these structures, and they snapped back into position, just like a regular artery or vein would do. A couple years later, they found more of it in a different type of dinosaur, a duck-billed dinosaur called Brachylophosaurus. And they once again found these branching structures that look just like blood vessels. And the gray pictures, those are blood vessels from a modern ostrich bone. So they took an ostrich bone and they put it under an electron microscope, really powerful microscope, and they looked to see what are the structures there. They found, okay, this is what it looks like. And then right in this little juncture here, there's a little spot in the fossil where there's this thing, and it's the same thing as what's right in here in the modern ostrich bone. You zoom in on it, it looks like that. And the ostrich one looks like this. electron microscopes don't take color photographs, so everything's always black and white for those. This is a cell. It's a cell that is responsible for building bone in animals. It's called an osteocyte. Actually, first called an osteoblast, then it's called an osteocyte, but they're the same type of cell. It's in the same spot. It's always right here because those cells need a lot of nutrients brought in from the blood in order to be able to build the bone that they're building. And eventually they become completely encased in it. These types of materials don't really last forever. We know a lot about biology. We know how biology materials degrade, and they degrade fairly quickly. Some faster than others, but none of them last forever, which is basically what 68 million years is. So there can be really surprising things in the fossil record as well. So let's think about fossils in biology a little bit. So fossils are used by geologists and paleontologists for a lot of different sorts of things. One, just first off, they help us to discover new organisms that nobody ever knew before. Right? The fossils that you have in these kits were not things that were known to people 300 years ago. They just didn't have them. Now, some of them are from groups that are alive today, like sharks and rays and wood and stuff like that. But nonetheless, there are particular animals and particular plants that are brand new, that were at that time brand new to science. Fossils also help us to learn about ecosystems and environments because a fossil isn't usually found all by itself. So this is a big chunk of limestone from the Green River Formation in Wyoming. And all these speckles on it are parts of fossils. Massive, just everywhere my finger touches, there's bunches of fossils. On the back, the identity of those fossils becomes a little more clear. Yeah, so we've got fish fossils. Oh, what's that? Chinfish, yeah. Poor little guppies. Well, they weren't that tasty anyway. They're kind of small, very bony. But these are fish that people didn't know about before. But one of the cool things is, right, there's a bunch of fish here. There's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's at least 15 fish on this, and I have no idea how many this is. There's just lots and lots. This is many, many much fishes. Fishy? Fish-eye? Anyway. Actually, there's a rule for this. If it's lots of individuals of the same species, many fish. If it's lots of fish from different species, fishes. So there you go. There actually is the word fishes, but you have to use it properly. You're talking about a lot of different sorts of fish that are together. So this, however, tells us that there was a group of animals that were living together and died together in some way. So fossils can get us not only to understand an individual organism, but they can also help give us clues about past environments and ecosystems and what was going on with them and how they came to be or how they came to no longer be in some way. And yes, there are also fossil bees, thinking of bees. There's other sorts of things that we can do. We can figure out things like relative dating, which it's important that you put those in the right order. That's relative dating, not dating relative, like no, none of that. All right. No. Oh. All right, I told you the jokes were not good. Not healthy, not good for you. Studies in evolution and extinction. And yes, that is one of the major ways that fossils are employed by most paleontologists. They're looking at fossils to help them understand biological evolution. So even if you don't agree with evolution, and I don't agree with all of evolution, there's some parts of it that work, but there's also other parts that don't. As a paleontologist, I was trained to think like an evolutionary paleontologist. All of my schooling was in public schools, and then all my colleges were standard public colleges. I learned to be an evolutionary paleontologist, even while I disagreed with it. And I think that's actually pretty helpful. It's important for us, as Christians in particular, one of the things that we're told in the Bible is to be in the world, but what? Excellent. We are to be in the world, but we are not to be of the world. To be in the world means that we must be engaged with the people and the culture around us. We are called to tell people about Jesus Christ, about his ministry, his mission, his sacrifice, and his victory over the grave. We must tell people about that. There's no component where you get to pick and choose, like, is this something I want to do as a Christian? Nope, you do. So we have to be in the world, we have to engage the world, but we're also supposed to not be conformed to the world, right? We're not supposed to let the world shape our thinking. We're supposed to instead be transformed by the renewing of our minds by the work of the Holy Spirit. And that word transformed in the Bible is actually the Greek word metamorpho, which is the same word that we use for metamorphic or metamorphism in geology and in biology. So there's a bunch of stuff. Here's an example of somebody who discovered something new. Yeah, this is Dr. Nick Longrich. He's a very good paleontologist. And this is him sitting next to a big plaster jacket that has within it the skull of the group of animals that I studied for my PhD, a group called mosasaurs. Any of you heard of mosasaurs before? They parted the Red Sea? No, they didn't. They were on either side when Moses went, that's it? No, they weren't that. Where have you guys seen mosasaurs before? Jurassic World. I waited so long, so very long for these things to show up. Took a long time. But we finally got our day in the sun. We finally got the Mosasaurus in Jurassic World, which is just a little bit bigger than life size. A lot bigger. About 3 times bigger than they were at life size. But mosasaurs were still, like the biggest mosasaurus that we have in the world, Mosasaurus hoffmanni, 54 feet long. Hold on. That's a lot of mosasaur there. Let's see. Yeah, that's almost the length of this entire room.
How long is the entire room?
The entire room looks like it's about 60 feet long. So basically, you could stick the mosasaurus in the room and it would not have any room to wiggle. It would just be like snout to tail. How wide is it? Body's going to be probably about 6-7 feet wide, plus flippers. The head is 6 feet long, and you become Children McNuggets at that point. Dr. Nick Longrich discovered, along with another team of folks, this new fossil mosasaur called Thalassotitan. One of the things I love about paleontology and biology is we have awesome, cool names. They're all in Latin or Greek and a lot in Chinese now as well, as more things get discovered out over there. But they all mean stuff. Thalassotitan actually means king of the sea. Pretty cool. Thalassotitan atrox. And that's the size of Thalassotitan compared to the outline of a killer whale. So it's bigger, it's badder, it's nastier, and it's a lizard. Yay. Yep. Mosasaurs are actually lizards. Just gigantic, huge, nasty ones, most of which just ate whatever they wanted. Some of them, they just ate shells and stuff like that, but most of them, pretty much if it fit, it was food. All right, so let's see. We're almost at 5 o'clock. All right. I can go till 10. No, it isn't. That's terrible. All right. So how do we even know that this is a new mosasaur, for example? How do we know that's new? Well, because nobody saw that one before. Well, but does that one match up with any of the other mosasaurs that we've discovered? And that gets us to how we understand life and what's called taxonomy. How many of you have heard the word taxonomy in a biology class before? What's that? Texas? Oh, taxes. Nope. So that's a good question. So what is taxonomy? Anybody remember from class?
Study of classifying organisms.
Outstanding. Nice job. Good science coming from the classes here. So the study of classifying animals, right? It's how we go about classifying stuff. All organisms are given 2 unique names, the genus and the species, right? Remember that? So let's briefly, oh yeah, remember, how many of you had to memorize this? I can hear the pain. I can hear it. King Philip came over for great spaghetti or something, right? All right. So, if we wanted to classify ourselves, as we are given the two names of Homo sapiens, it means wise man. Wise man. Because we're smarter than the average bear. And average everything else. So our cell types, we don't have bacterial cell types. We have cells that have a nucleus in them, right? And that is why we are part of the group that we call eukaryota. All the things that have cells with nuclei are in a big basket that we call eukaryotes. But so are plants, and so are fungi, and so are protists. So what are we? We're animalia. And more specifically, we're chordates. We have a backbone. But so do the fish. And we are not fishies. We are fishers of men, but we are not the fish. All right? This cast of an ichthyosaurus looks pretty cool. So that is ichthyosaurus. In English, what that means is fish lizard. Because it looks like a fish, but it's actually a reptile that gave birth to live young, no eggs. Oh, yeah. There's weird things in the fossil record. So this ichthyosaurus is a vertebrate, a chordate like we are, but it's a reptile, not like us. We are mammals. And there's lots of different sorts of mammals. We are in the group called primates, or it looks like primates. That's how we would normally say it, but primates is the group that has the monkeys and the apes. And if you know your VeggieTales, if it doesn't have a tail, it's not a monkey, even if it has a monkey kind of shape. We're in a group called Hominidae, and then Homo and Sapiens. That's how you categorize us, so that you say, of all the things biologically in the world, what are you? This whole system was first invented. The two-name system was invented by a Christian by the name of Carl Linnaeus, or Carolus Linnaeus. And he wanted a way to organize all the things that he believed that God had made. And so he created the name genus, and the word species he borrowed from Latin. Genus and species in Latin mean general and specific, or kind. And he named everything that he could find. It was once said of him that God creates, but Linnaeus classifies. Like, wow, okay, that guy seemed to be on a mission. And afterwards, people added these other things like classes and phyla and whatnot. So that's us. Yep, there's me, there's my wife, and anybody recognize the guy in the middle? Elon Musk. I wish. Elon would have put on a few pounds for this, but this is a guy who works with what's called World Watch, which is a daily news program for students. It's the Big Bash. Yep. So my wife and I met up with him at a homeschool meeting, and we're like taking a picture. He's like, that's what we're doing here. So we took a picture. So it's us in the Big Bash. So that's us. That's human beings right there. But dogs are different, right? I figured if I had to talk about gross stuff for the boys, I also had to throw some cute stuff in for some of the gals. So, by the way, gentlemen in the room, did you hear that noise that some of those girls made? Oh. Figure out what I did and figure out how to copy it. All right, I'm just saying. My apologies to the staff. There's going to be a whole bunch of puppies brought to school tomorrow. All right, so what's the difference, guys? Take a look here. So dogs are also eukaryotes. They're also animals. They're also chordates. They're also mammals. Here's where the difference starts being important. Of all the types of mammals, dogs are not in the same group as the primates. They're in a different group called the carnivores. And the carnivores includes the bears, the hyenas, the cats, the dogs, and the weasel, the group that we call the mustelids, a whole bunch of them. So that's where they start to differ. Then they're in the family Canidae. That means the dog family. And then they are Canis familiaris, the familiar dog. They're the domesticated dog, as opposed to some of the other types of dogs that are out there that might have different genus and species names. Canis lupus, that is the wolf. Right? Canis latrans, that's the coyote. Or as they say out northwest, coyotes. I'm still trying to figure that one out. But anyway. Trees are different, really different. They're eukaryotes, but they're plants. And then if you want to figure out what the maple tree is, the sugar maple, for example, you got to follow this all the way down until you get to acer saccharum, which means maple sugar. Cool. All right. Got that. So when it comes to the stuff that you guys have, here's where we're going to start exploring each one of the fossils that you've got in your bag. We have a plant fossil. And the particular plant fossil that you guys have is a piece of petrified wood. And that's a pretty common type of fossil to have. And there's places where it's really abundant. There's even a national park called Petrified Forest National Park out in Arizona. You can't collect the fossil wood from there. It's protected. But nonetheless, if you get just outside of the park boundary, you're going to find that there's plenty of people with land who will sell you their petrified wood. Because for them, it's just rock. They don't care. But they care because you get money. So petrified wood is one example of many different types of plant fossils that we have. Here in Virginia, if you wanted to find plant fossils, probably the place to visit, you'd have to go way towards the western tail, the panhandle, and up north of Interstate 81. So it would take a while to get there. But there's good coal country up over there. And in those coal mines, you'll have lots and lots of plant fossils because coal is made from fossilized trees. Amber is not just a name, it's a thing, right? It's a name that came from the actual thing first. Amber is a golden colored type of fossil that is fossilized tree sap, right? It's tree resin. It's basically maple syrup that's been turned into a fossil. My sister-in-law's name is Amber, and her husband gets her amber jewelry from time to time. I mean, it's pretty sappy, but I understand why he does it. I think I need to rinse. That wasn't a very good joke at all, but hey, it keeps working. And by the way, I consider groans and laughter to be the same thing. Because that just means that you are still with me. You heard that. You got it. Doesn't have to be funny. You also have some corals in there. Oh, one of my corals didn't show up. The one that's actually in your thing there. Stick coral, horn coral, branch coral. There's a bunch of different types of corals out there. And corals are animals, which is really weird because when you look at it, it looks like this giant rock. And that's kind of true because the animals build a rock for themselves. Each one of the little dots that you see in that lower picture is a little cup holding a coral animal, which basically looks like a jellyfish stuck inside the cup. And they stick their tentacles out and they grab things. How many have been to Sequest over in the mall, right? They got a bunch of corals in there. They got anemones. Anemones are in the same group as the corals. They're part of a group called the cnidarians, the stinging cell animals. But there's a lot of different sorts of corals, but all of them are colonial animals that build these basically giant apartment complexes out of minerals around themselves for protection. You got things like horn corals because they look like little horns, but actually the tip sticks down into the sediment, and the upper part is where all the colonies are, and they just keep growing out and out and out in this big kind of circle horn shape. There's clams. Got a fossil clam there. The clam that you have comes from Morocco. Not because we don't have clam fossils in the United States, but Morocco has a very active fossil trade, and they get stuff very cheap and sell it to everybody. Okay, so you've got a body fossil there, but you can also, if you broke the clam fossil, inside you would find a cast, because the inside of that fossil is filled in with mud, and you would get a preserved picture of the inside of the clam fossil. These sorts of fossils are fairly common too. They're oysters. Right? We have modern oysters. There are oyster fossils. And those oyster fossils often picked up an interesting nickname. They were called the devil's toenails. Because they're scooped on one end and they come to this like nasty looking weird pointy curl at the other. And apparently the devil lost a lot of toenails because there's a lot of them out there. I don't know. Frank Peretti probably wrote a book about this. But anyway, all sorts of things. And those clams are all different from one another. Oysters are very different from the upper clams there. They're different from the clams that are making casts in the limestone and different from the other ones. Snails are wildly different from each other too. I mean, God's creation is vast. It is really, really vast. And we've got a couple of different types of snail shells there that are the internal casts. We also have ones that preserve the shell on the outside and are filled with different stuff. The one that you guys have, either the white or the pink, is filled in with a mud, a fine mud, and maybe even a limestone that would fizz with acid reaction. This one, on the other hand, is filled in with basically stuff like quartz and is super hard and durable, and sometimes is even in a big quartz matrix. This is cut through and sliced so that you can see through the snail shells. And they spiral and have different sorts of shapes. And we describe, for biology, we will describe these according to all sorts of different components of that shell. You can see the upper left one is really, really round. That's a group of snail shells that we call the globose type, because their snail shells are round like a globe. The one on the bottom below it, the real tall, skinny one, is called a turritella, or a turreted shell, because it looks like a turret on a castle. So we borrowed like construction terms and bring them over to biology. There's examples of different types. There's that turreted down at the bottom, your globose, and all these other sorts of terms like the apex and the protoconch and the final war. All of these things are actually what scientists who are doing the work of taxonomy pay attention to. So for us, the first thing that you might find out, the first thing that you're going to do in biology is like, okay, is this an animal? Is this a plant? Is this a protist? And then you're going to get, well, what sort of animal is it? Is it a fish or a bird or a reptile or a mammal? But when it comes down to trying figuring out that species, that's when things get really, really detailed. And it kind of just reminds me that God doesn't forget about details. He could have made snails that are all pretty much the same. Like 5 types of snails and probably the world would have been fine. We need some ones in the ocean. We need some ones on the land. We need some snails to do some cleanup work. Okay. But instead, God made tens of thousands of different types of snails. Tens of thousands of different ones. He could have done differently, but he wanted to show just how creative he is. Likewise with sharks. Sharks, there's a lot of sharks out there today. There's a lot of sharks in the fossil record. And some of the sharks in the fossil record are wacky. I mean, they're just really weird, completely different from anything we have alive today. This is a good example of our vertebrate animals. They have a backbone, these and the rays. Oops. So there's the rays. You've got a couple of these. Their teeth, the first time I ever saw a ray tooth, I was in college. I was working on a project identifying some fossils from a site in North Carolina. And I kept coming across this thing that looked like the head of a bolt. There's this little hexagon. And on the other side of it, it had these 2 little grooves like it was the end of a screw. I'm like, so what's a bolt and a screw doing together? That doesn't seem to work right. And it took me a while. I had to look through papers and books and eventually discovered, oh, these were teeth from stingrays. Stingrays, again, if you get to go over to Sequest, they've got the big tank with the rays in it. And of course, like some of them are always like coming up to you and trying to like eat something. If you get a chance to look down into their mouth, don't like pick them up to do that. That's rude. That's very rude. They don't appreciate that very much. But anyway, their teeth are made up of this pavement of bricks. Their teeth are like bricks, and they just mash things. They don't chew, they don't slice, they don't cut, they just bust things apart. So they like to eat things like shrimp. And they like to eat things like starfish, because those things crunch pretty easily, and then they're just nice and gooey inside, and they like that stuff. Lots of things are gooey inside. Rolos are gooey on the inside. They're good. Deep fried starfish. Okay, I could get behind that. As in, I can get behind the person who's going to try it and then see what happens. I don't know about that. Sharks, of course, are using their teeth to slice. to take slices and chunks out of stuff. And they don't chew their food. They take a slice and then they just hork it down. But different shapes of different teeth are found in different parts of the jaw, and different types of teeth are found in different sorts of sharks. Again, God could have made, 10 types of sharks. Probably would have got the job done. Instead, he made hundreds and hundreds of types of sharks. So the last thing that I'll talk about here, as we're coming up on the last few minutes, is a little bit about fossils and then their connection with geology. So we looked at fossils in biology. So I said that the fossils are remains of formerly living organisms that are found in a geological context. They have to be found in some sort of rock. And that means that fossils get used by geologists to do different sorts of things. Dead white guy number 1. All right, so dead white guy number 1 is a man by the name of Nico Steno. You can see the date down there. He was living in the middle 1600s, so this is not recent. This is a while back. Nico Steno has a fascinating history. He died at a young age, which was unfortunate. He died when he was 43, I think, 42 or 43. This man grew up in Denmark during the religious wars period. If some of you have heard a little bit about that, Europe went into lots and lots of civil war over Catholicism versus Protestantism. He grew up as a Protestant in Denmark, and his dad was a watchmaker. And if you think about watches back in the 1600s, those were probably the most sophisticated piece of technology that had been invented at that point. That was like the iPhone of their day. A watch was filled with these intricate little screws and these little tiny coils and all these gears. It was a lot of very detailed work. Steno wanted to be a doctor, so he enrolled in the university to study medicine. But the war came to Copenhagen, and he nearly died of starvation while he was there as a student. It was not an easy time. He finally got out and went to France and worked under another anatomist. He worked under a biologist and actually discovered something in the human body that nobody had ever seen before. It wasn't in the human body, but it was in a mammal. He was doing a dissection of a pig. You got to get bacon somehow. Might as well make it interesting. So he was doing a dissection of a pig, and he discovered that there was a salivary duct in the lower jaw. He found a place that went from the salivary production organ and then a duct that brought it into the mouth so that your saliva can be brought into the mouth. And he discovered that. Well, the guy he was working for claimed credit for it. He said, no, I found that. Steno had to write to people for about 10 years to convince everybody else that he was the one who actually did it. And because Steno was so skilled with the scalpel, everybody knew he was the best. They pretty much decided it must have been him that would have done it because the other guy was so clumsy that it would have looked more like pig hamburger than anything that would have been identifiable. So Steno, actually today, to this very day, the ductus stenovus is named after him, and that's a salivary duct in all mammals. So he's got a nice accomplishment there. He also discovered a couple of different rules in mineralogy, studying minerals, and he wanted to answer a question, and that was, how did these things get in a rock? It's a very good question. It's especially a good question in the 1600s because nobody had worked out the answer to that yet. I've already told you the answer. I told you that animals die and then are covered with sediment, but in the 1600s, nobody knew that. Steno, however, was pretty convinced, not so much that fish, because they didn't have a whole lot of fossil fish known at that time, but they did see stuff like this. And Steno thought these were probably biological things, but other people just thought that they were funny things that grew in the rock. And there was no way of figuring out who was right and who was wrong about that. Steno was convinced these were animals. So how do you get an animal inside of a rock? To do that, he had to basically become a geologist and study geology. And he discovered a couple of different things, some basic rules in geology. One called original horizontality. Doesn't that sound sophisticated? It means that stuff starts out flat. Thankfully not flat Earth. But think about when you've been to the beach before. and you look out at the beach from one side to the other, and the beach is basically big and flat, right? It's got a little bit of a slope going down to the water, but it's basically a big sheet of sand. And Steno saw that, and he went, wait a minute. When I go over to the Alps, when I take a walk in the hills, I find that some of the rocks are tilted like this. The rocks that have sand in them are tilted like this. Well, if they got sand in them, they shouldn't have started off this way, because sand doesn't do this. Sand falls flat and spreads out. So he figured out that rocks that started off, that look this way now, must have started off this way. Okay, good observation, good inference. He then figured out the next logical step, and that was, if you have a rock that starts out like this, and you have another rock that forms, it's going to have to form on top of that other one. And so even if they're tilted this way, if I can figure out which one was on the bottom, I can figure out there were other ones on top. Now I've actually got a sequence, because I can't put this rock here unless this one is there first. And for the very first time in human history, people like Steno were able to start looking at rocks not just as things that are there, but things that could tell a story. Things that actually have a history. He's looking at rocks like this and saying, wait a minute, they start off like this, and then it was 1, then 2, then 3. He wrote about this and some other rules, like cross-cutting relations. He wrote up his ideas in a 70-page paper, 7-0. 70-page paper that he promised was only the beginning of a much larger discussion that he was going to get into. He never did get around to that. He converted to Catholicism, became a priest, and continued work in biology, but as I said, he died at a very young age and never completed his work here. But nonetheless, from the 70 pages that Steno wrote was born the discipline of geology that I'm in now. Paleontology and what's called stratigraphy, studying the layers of the rocks. Nico Steno began it. Nico Steno, in his 70 pages, talked about how all of this happened from Creation Week and into Noah's flood, and after Noah's flood was done. The one major illustration that he had was trying to explain how the rocks near where he lived in Tuscany, Italy, could have come about. And he started off with rocks that were made during Creation Week. He believed some of them were dissolved during the flood. We would now use the word eroded. And then new things were formed during the flood, and then some of those were dissolved, and then things happened after the flood. And he proposed, this is how I can understand the geology that I see in Italy. And he wrote that up, and he passed it to the Catholic board that would look over stuff and make sure that it conformed to Catholic ideas. And they went, this is fantastic, and they published it. The very beginnings of geology are rooted in Christianity, and they are rooted in a creationist worldview. Now, most geologists are neither Christians nor creationists today. But one of the things that this shows to me is that the beginning of most of our sciences starts off with Christians, and they start off with Christians because Christianity had something that the other pagan religions never had. Why is it that the Greeks came really close to science but didn't make it? They didn't quite get there. It's partly because of a pantheon of gods, right? There's all sorts of different gods in Greeks. There's Zeus, there's Hera, and they're always fighting because Zeus is always making babies with people who aren't Hera. It's a mess. It's true, just saying. I think that's all right. So, we've got Neptune, right? Poseidon. He's making a mess out of things in the ocean. You've got Apollo running around, bringing mess. Yep, that's right, Percy Jackson. All that stuff, right? You can't make sense of the world when it's all controlled by gods who act like big versions of people. Because you're never going to know if the gods are going to be consistent. You can always say, well, the reason why this happened is because this god was happy with me. The reason why this happened is because this god wasn't. And I can't make sense of the world because it's all about the warring and the infighting of the gods. But the Bible tells us that there is one God, one and only one God, who created a world and created us in his own image to be the people to run the world for him. Yeah. The image of God that's talked about in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, well, it's actually mentioned in Genesis 1. The image of God, that's the same Hebrew word image as is used later in the Ten Commandments, that you will not create any graven images. Same word. The reason that you cannot make an image of God is that God has already made an image of himself for him. And that is you and me. And he placed us on this earth and gave us jobs. Adam and Eve's job was to have dominion and to rule over the earth and to tend the garden. Right? That dominion and rule is mentioned in Genesis 1, and then what we see worked out is that is about naming the animals and tending the garden and doing it right. And if you do those things, you are doing what God wants us to do. He put us in this world to manage it. Most of you guys probably don't have a job working at the local Chick-fil-A yet. But when you do, you'll answer to a manager. With Chick-fil-A, that manager is also the owner, but in most other places it's not. If you work at Waffle House, you work at McDonald's, the manager is just the manager. The owner is somebody else. God created us to be managers and sent Jesus Christ in our same bodily form to show us what it's like when the owner runs the place. And it's much better. Nico Steno was trying to do that work, and in so doing, he figured out ways in which geology happened. He could now look at a set of rocks and say, I don't just see rocks, I just don't see random things that God made and put in place. I see instead a history of the world, from creation through to the fall through today. So scientists will study them and they'll take a look at the fossils, and they might be working in different places, and sometimes they're still looking at the same fossils. That's pretty cool. There are fossils in North America that are identical to fossils in Africa. Some of that stuff in Morocco is the same as what we see here in the Appalachian Mountains. Sorry, Appalachians. I'm in the south. So this little time scale that I had you guys get, this colored insert, this was formed using principles that Steno and other early geologists figured out. Steno never got around to the answer of how do you get a fossil, how do you get an animal inside of a rock? But he was almost there. He figured out all of the clues that everybody else would then use to answer his question. So for the most part, fossils are found in sedimentary rocks. They're found in rocks that are laid down by mud and sand and lime and things like that. When we find the same sorts of fossils found in two different places, we link those places together. We call that correlation. You'll hear that word in science a lot, correlation, because it means that two things have some sort of connection to one another. So we've got, there we go. Fossils are found in rocks, and there are patterns to which fossils are found where. And we use different colors to represent these. These are actually like the normal colors that geologists use to describe different parts of the geologic record. Green is used for the Mesozoic, the dinosaur-bearing rocks, for example. Blue is used for the rocks below, and yellow is used for the rocks above. Now, it seems like there's three different times in which geology is very, very active. Certainly during the creation week, also during Noah's flood, and also probably right after the flood, in a few centuries afterwards. These are the times in which most of the geological layers that we have are either being created initially, or later being destroyed and reworked into the layers that have lots of fossils. Right? God creates the world in how many days? I'll take either one, right? He creates the world in 6 days. He rests on the seventh. And the first couple of days, there's no animals or plants or anything like that around, right? God created light. He separates waters. Then he causes the waters and the land to separate. Then he makes some plants. So I don't expect that there's going to be much for fossils of animals in the rocks that God initially created. There shouldn't be, right? There's no death yet in the world or anything like that. And so I would suggest that most of the fossil record that we have is probably formed during the flood because it's after the fall, after death has been introduced to the world. But there's also a point in time where sooner or later the flood is over, the world is being recolonized, but there's still a lot of geologic stuff happening. And as a result, we're going to have more fossils that are made in the post-flood world. In our world today, fossil formation is pretty rare. It happens in some places, but it doesn't happen very many. And yet we have fossils all over the world. So we need a process that is different from what looks like today And the flood is a process that's very, very different from anything today. So that's kind of what I just said. But if the earth is young, then the situation is very different, right? During Noah's flood and for a while afterwards, the conditions in which animals die and are buried by lots of sediment very quickly, our model predicts that very, very well. All right, so that's it for me. We've got Mr. Hill coming up over here. We'll take questions maybe after Mr. Hill's done because I don't want to infringe on his time. And we'll, unless...
Why don't we do questions after the second session?
After the second session.
Does that sound good?
Sounds awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Hey, guys, thanks. That was fun. I enjoyed it. I hope you guys had some fun here.